how can policy respond to proposals for tall buildings outside the borough, which may be visible in key views such as those of the World Heritage Site? And I think this is something that was touched on earlier. Is there an appropriate policy response for Westminster, and do you have any views about what that should be?
Johnny Savills. As somebody who spent quite a large part of my former life assessing with developers Figure 3, the view from St James's Park Bridge, and looking at schemes, particularly in the south of London, to see whether they were actually visible from that particular point in St James's Bridge, I think you have to be fairly careful, and I'd be wanting to urge a greater degree of flexibility. I think I certainly agree with the points which Hugh has previously made, and I think also there's a real danger. The reality in terms of what you do see, and actually the expectations in terms of the policy analysis and what you expect it to provide are rather different. So if you're looking at St James's, if you actually stand at St James's Bridge, what you actually see is the eye in great foreground. Very rarely do you see some of those tall buildings which there are concerns about, or would you see in reality on most days. And in fact, you end up quite often in a sort of scenario whereby developers are trying to respond to those particular views, for example, and you end up with poorer quality buildings, which nevertheless get the go-ahead. I think one of the reasons why there is a GLA is precisely to coordinate those strategic issues. I think, as I said, the City Council need to be slightly careful. They do need to exercise a greater degree of flexibility. And, of course, the other issue, which is quite hard to put in policy, but it's about dialogue with adjoining boroughs, because very little of that currently happens. I think that's something which I would certainly urge.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm speaking just as a kind of member of the public, really, although I am a councillor here and sit on the planning committee. But I was quite shocked when I walked across Westminster Bridge recently, and I think the view east is stunning, amazing, but the view west has been so ruined. I mean, the density of the building that's on the south bank, if you look west along the river, is just horrendous. And I thought, what a lovely view of London that's just been ruined by over-dense building. And I just hope that we can influence, such developments in the future. Although, of course, it wasn't in Westminster, it wasn't our local authority, but it has ruined a very beautiful part of London. And I think the development is St George's, isn't it? Where they seem to kind of these kind of great big residential blocks seem to breed overnight. And there was like one to start, and then I think half a dozen of them now, and that really has spoiled a very nice part of London. So
you'd certainly support the council continuing to object to those types of developments?
Absolutely. I think we need to, as the central borough in London, with so much going on around us. I think it's essential that we do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going to add another question in regarding tall buildings and whether or not anyone wants to give any views about where might tall buildings be appropriate within Westminster, and where do we feel that they're particularly not appropriate? And in terms of this, we're not necessarily talking about the tallest buildings, but we may also be talking about buildings that are significantly higher than their surrounding development. And I wondered if there were any particular views people had on those two issues. No, that's... Oh.
Thank you. Simon Looms from Portman Estate. I think tall buildings are very dense in their population, so you've got to take into account transport interchanges and how they relate to those.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I would suggest that Victoria Street is a street that should be kept to a reasonable height. The design that existed up to about 3 or 4 years ago was very sensitively designed, in fact, by Leslie Martin, I think, was the influence for the plan for this urban design of Victoria Street, where we had 3 separated tall buildings, 3 separate towers, and they stood well with other lower development. When we had a proposal for for the Victoria Transport Interchange with 40-storey towers overlooking the parks, overlooking Buckingham Palace, showed absolutely no respect for culture of the existing heart of Westminster. So we should not ever get ourselves into that situation again.
So your particular concern about Victoria Street is particularly in relation to the parks and Buckingham Palace and the relationship.
But also the space at ground level, the fluidity of the space at ground level, particularly of the stretch between Artillery Mansions and Victoria Station. That has a quality which is relatively unique in the centre of London, and certainly in the commercial centre.
Thank you. Are there any other views on appropriate or very inappropriate locations for tall buildings? Okay.